So the disciples are selfish. Jesus comes onto the scene in Matthew chapter 20 and lays a foundation for them that he's about to die. He tells them, I'm going to be bruised, I'm going to suffer, and I'm going to experience many things. And their response to Jesus was to care more about their positions in the kingdom of heaven. Remember, James and John's mother wanted to find out if their sons could sit one on the right, one on the left, and the disciples were indignant about it. It caused such a scuffle that people began to wonder exactly what their position will be when they get to the kingdom, not even realizing that Jesus had just told them again that he was going to die. So what does Jesus do? Removes himself from that and introduces servant leadership. Jesus said to them in Matthew chapter 20, verse 28, he says, listen, the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve. Wait a minute, he didn't say that. There's some words I left out. He said, for even the Son of Man come not to be served, but to serve. That's an amazing indictment right there, because he's saying, if I'm doing it, guess what? You're doing it as well. And he lays the feet of these words in John chapter 13, where he picks up the basin and a towel and begins washing the disciples' feet. Now imagine that for a second. The creator of the universe is washing the disciples' feet as an example of the words that he spoke in Matthew chapter 20, verse 28. What a God we serve. And now the onus is on the disciples to follow his plan. So what is it that makes them excited to go from these selfish individuals that were concerned with their seating arrangements in the kingdom of heaven to the disciples that we know who gave their lives for the cause of Christ? I'll tell you what it was. It was the resurrection of Jesus Christ that changed the game on servant leadership. It was because of that resurrection that it began to establish in these disciples a heart to serve others. Now, that's pretty impressive when you think about who God is and what he's required us to do, because the Lord will not ask us to do anything he himself is not willing to do. So yes, he came to serve and to give his life a ransom for many. And these disciples changed the game once the resurrection took place. Paul catches up to this in Acts chapter 9, and he gets excited about who God is and discovers for himself that I want to be a servant too. But when Paul gets a hold of servant leadership, he expands it because he realizes that he's not the only one serving. And so servant leadership then shifts under Paul's care to strategic leadership. He takes servant leadership and expands it to strategic leadership. And now Paul has shown that there's ways to spread this thing around so that everyone can participate in servant leadership. Missionary journeys, he goes on 3 of them. As Paul is doing that, he realizes that there's another layer to servant leadership. The first layer of servant leadership is strategic leadership, letting everybody know. The second layer of servant leadership is administrative leadership. So he takes servant leadership, uses strategic leadership, and now he has administrative leadership in order to bring people together so they can do it together in the right way. It's an amazing thing as Paul talking to the church at Corinth in 1 Corinthians chapter 12 to remind them of the standing by which they're supposed to do what they do. He acknowledges the fact that they are doing great work, but they're not doing it the right way. And so he has to get them together and administratively puts things in place for people to connect these dots so that servant leadership can still be the root of everything that we do. But we can't stop there. When you have servant leadership and you move to strategic leadership and you go to administrative leadership, you have just built a foundation by which people can stand, which leads to the last level of servant leadership, equipping leadership. That means everyone can stand on this board. Now that we have a strategy, now that we have administration, more people can stand on servant leadership. That's where you bring your gifts and your talents. You're not picking up a basin and a towel and just washing everybody's feet, but you are bringing the best of who you are, the best of who God wants you to be, and you're seeing the best in people because of what you're doing in servant leadership. So servant leadership is not just the basin in the towel. It's how many basins and towels you can get throughout the world. Oh, I'm so grateful for God setting the foundation for us to be the example of what servant leadership looks like, and then for us to follow and expand on it to the glory of God. So my prayer as we think about servant leadership, as we think about the mission, that we would make sure that we follow that trail of servant leadership as a foundation, strategic leadership that gives us the route and the plan, administrative leadership that organizes it, and then equipping leadership so that others can be a part of this foundation of doing exactly what the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords said, and that was to serve.